Welcome to another edition of our prep football video preview. Gabe Wilson, sports editor of the Gaston Gazette, joined by Richard Walker, Philip Gardner. We're going to talk about a few things going on this week and maybe look ahead to a few things going on next year. First question I have for y'all is East Gaston-North Gaston matchup. Not a huge game as far as the conference standings go, but what kind of atmosphere do you expect from this game? You know, what are maybe some things to look out for, even though the records aren't all that great?
I think it's it's a kind of an unknown rivalry. I mean, the two schools were opened in the same year. There's a segment of North Gaston students that went to Stanley Middle School, the same as East Gaston. They're side by side in the upper end of the county. Certainly both teams have struggled. The irony of it all is that East Gaston won the conference 2 years ago and they went winless the next year. North Gaston, of course, didn't win the conference last year, but they were second and went all the way to state finals, and now they're looking at being winless. I think that both teams have to realize or recognize that this is their best chance of winning a game. And then there's an interesting subplot to the story in that East Gaston's best player, running back Thaddeus Benton's father, Buster Benton, was one of North Gaston's all-time best running backs in the 80s. So, there's some intermingling between the two communities, and they certainly know each other from having played middle school and Pop Warner football with and against one another.
Thanks, Phil. I think it's funny that there's been more anticipation toward this game than probably any other game in the season. I mean, of course, there's a lot of talk about South Point, Ashbrook. Once Forest View, South Point became a big one, there's a lot of talk about that one. But from the very beginning, people have been saying, hey, this is going to be a big game because both of these teams are going to struggle this year. One of them's going to have a real good shot. And I think there's just a lot of build-up, and I think for that reason, the fans are really going to be into it. They know this is going to be both teams' best opportunity to date for a win. And, it might not be a packed-out house like you see at these big-time first-place matchups, but I think there's going to be an excited crowd and a lot of big-time plays on the field because these guys are going to give it all for this game.
A number of competitive matchups, I think, in the league or in the Big South this week. You got Hunter Husk Crest, you got Forest View Ashbrook. Which one of these games can you see maybe going down the wire, maybe being an overtime game?
I think Forest View Ashbrook has potential to be probably the biggest nail biter just because it's two, I think, fairly evenly matched teams, plus it's a rivalry. I mean, these schools hate each other. The rivalry maybe isn't as evident in football as it is in some other sports, but still you've got neighboring schools, you've got kids that know each other really well in both schools. And, finally Forest View has, one of its best teams, if not its best team in school history, and they know this is a great chance to beat Ashbrook. Ashbrook's been sort of inconsistent, but I see them really playing up for this game just because of a rivalry, and I could really see this being, like a 24-23 game or something like that.
And I agree with Phil, but I also see the Husk-Crest game being interesting. Husk has certainly had Crest number until last year. They'd won a couple in a row. A lot of people forget this. I'm old enough to remember Steve Gardner was an old Burns quarterback, so he remembers going against Crest when he was a player. Husk's offensive strategies, I've seen a couple of the games where they've lost or where Husk has beat Crest, and it seemed like their offensive strategy has given Crest a lot of trouble. I remember 2 years ago the game at Crest where Husk went over there and really took it to them, as much as anybody took it to them 2 years ago, and that was when Crest had a really good, solid team, and I look for that to be an interesting matchup, but they both are. I mean, really, all three Big South games this week, I could see going into overtime because of the way the teams, the inconsistent nature of the teams, and the nature, particularly in East Gaston, North Gaston, and Ashbrook Forest View, of the rivalry aspect to the game.
And as a lot of people know, the realignment starts next fall. We got a few teams switching conferences, a few conferences saying exactly the same. One of our viewers, Jay Hill, wanted to know what these guys what their take was on the upcoming realignment. So just wanted to get maybe a few impressions of what you guys think about the realignment.
Well, I'm looking forward to Kings Mountain coming over here. I think that's going to be a good addition to the league. I know East Gaston hates being in a 4A conference and having to leave, but Kings Mountain, Greg Lloyd, former Crest coach, former Crest player, former East Gaston coach, certainly familiar with the league, as evidenced by what they did last week to Shelby and the fact that you have to rate them the odds-on favorite to win that Southwestern Conference. They're only going to add to the talent and depth of the Big South, which, last year, I don't know what's going to happen this year in the playoffs, but last year I think they and maybe the Triad, 2A, 3A, or 3A, 4A, whatever the league that Dudley and Western Elements and all those guys was in, they were the two winningest playoff football conferences in the state. So it'll certainly enhance Big South, certainly in football. And, you look at Kings Mountain's history, they've had varying degrees of success in virtually all sports. Most notably, recently, the softball and volleyball teams have won state championships. But I've been here long enough where they've won a state championship in golf. They've won a state championship in baseball. They've been in a state championship game in basketball. So I think they're a real solid addition to the Big South Conference.
The most intriguing thing locally to me for the realignment is East Gaston's move out of Gaston County to Mecklenburg. And I hate it for them because, they would have gone 8 years in an almost exclusively Gaston County conference, and now they're going to be sort of the black sheep in terms of geography. And I know they really are disappointed by that. It'll be interesting to see how they respond and how they can compete against these other schools in Charlotte, because it's going to be, travel's going to be an issue. These other teams are going to be playing are going to be sort of an unknown. They know the Gaston County teams really, really well, and there's going to be more uncertainty going to their conference games. But on the flip side, you look at their non-conference schedule, they'll still be playing Gaston County opponents as much as possible during the regular season non-conference schedule. So disappointing for East Gaston, but it'll be interesting to see how they respond to that.
And that'll wrap it up for this week. I want to thank Jay for sending in a few questions for us. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to send them to sports@gastongazette.com, and we'll see if we can get these guys to answer them for you. That'll do it, and we'll see you next week.